Shadow's claws scraped against weathered stone as he dug frantically into the earth beside a forgotten grave. Navy veteran Carter Lang had followed his German Shepherd here every morning for 3 weeks, watching helplessly as his loyal companion ignored every command to leave. But today was different. Today, Shadow's determined excavation would unearth a metal box containing letters that revealed a mission Carter had supposedly completed, yet had no memory of living through. The secrets buried in that graveyard would shake the foundations of everything Carter believed about his military service and force an entire town to confront a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Carter Lang stood at the edge of Willowbrook Cemetery, his weathered hands gripping Shadow's leash as the morning mist clung to the tombstones like ghostly fingers. The German Shepherd strained against the leather, his powerful muscles tensing as he fixed his amber eyes on the same grave that had captured his attention for 21 consecutive days. Carter's jaw tightened with frustration. In all his years serving alongside military working dogs in Afghanistan and Iraq, he'd never encountered such stubborn, inexplicable behavior. "Come on, boy," Carter muttered, his voice carrying the rough edge of someone who'd spent too many sleepless nights. "There's nothing here for us." But even as the words left his lips, he knew they rang hollow. Shadow had been his constant companion for 5 years since Carter's medical discharge, and the dog had never exhibited this kind of obsessive fixation before. Something about this particular patch of earth called to the animal with an urgency that defied explanation. The grave belonged to someone named Marcus Rivera, according to the simple granite headstone. Born 1985, died 2019. No epitaph, no flowers, no indication that anyone still visited this lonely corner of the cemetery. Carter had researched the name online but found nothing significant, just a brief obituary mentioning Rivera had been a local handyman who died in a car accident. Yet Shadow's behavior suggested something far more complex lurked beneath the surface. As Carter approached the headstone for what felt like the 100th time, Shadow's ears perked forward, and his tail began wagging with an intensity that bordered on frantic. The dog's nose pressed against the earth, sniffing deeply before he started pawing at the ground with deliberate, almost methodical movements. Carter's military training kicked in, and he found himself scanning their surroundings with the hypervigilance that had kept him alive overseas. The cemetery appeared deserted, except for a maintenance worker emptying trash bins near the entrance. But something in Shadow's demeanor suggested they weren't alone. "What is it, Shadow?" Carter knelt beside his companion, running his fingers through the dog's thick coat. "What do you smell down there?" The question emerged more as a whisper to himself than a command to the animal. Carter's therapist at the VA had warned him about projecting his own unresolved trauma onto his service dog, but this felt different. Shadow's focus carried the same intensity Carter had witnessed when the dog detected IEDs in the field, a life-or-death alertness that couldn't be dismissed as mere canine curiosity. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and revealing the full scope of the cemetery's neglected beauty. Willowbrook had been established in 1887, and its older sections bore the weathered elegance of a bygone era. Elaborate Victorian monuments cast long shadows across newer, simpler graves, like Marcus Rivera's. Carter noticed that Rivera's plot sat in an isolated section, separated from the main pathways by a grove of ancient oak trees. It was the kind of location someone might choose if they wanted a burial to remain unnoticed. Shadow's digging intensified, his claws scraping against something harder than soil. Carter felt his pulse quicken as he realized the dog had found something substantial buried beneath the surface. Military protocol warred with civilian caution in Carter's mind. He should probably contact the cemetery administration, maybe even the police, before disturbing a grave site. But Shadow's behavior had become so urgent, so desperate, that Carter found himself dropping to his knees and helping to clear away the loose earth. "Easy, boy," Carter whispered as his fingers encountered the edge of something metallic. "Let's see what's got you so worked up." The object felt like a small container, roughly the size of a shoebox, but much heavier. Carter's hands trembled slightly as he worked to free it from the soil, memories of uncovering buried explosives flooding back despite his efforts to stay focused on the present moment. When the container finally came free, Carter sat back on his heels and stared at it in bewilderment. The metal box bore no markings, except for a series of numbers etched into its surface. July 15, 2018. The date meant nothing to Carter, but Shadow's reaction suggested otherwise. The dog sat perfectly still, his tail wagging slowly as he watched Carter examine their discovery with an expression that seemed almost human in its expectancy. Carter's military training had taught him to approach unknown containers with extreme caution, but something about this particular box felt familiar in a way that made his stomach clench with unease. The metal showed signs of deliberate weatherproofing, as if someone had intended for it to survive underground for an extended period. Carter found himself thinking about the various dead drops and cache sites he'd encountered during his deployment, hidden repositories where sensitive materials waited for authorized personnel to retrieve them. With careful movements, Carter lifted the box and examined its simple latch mechanism. The container wasn't locked, but years of burial had corroded the hinges enough to require significant force to open. Carter glanced around the cemetery once more, confirming they remained alone, before applying pressure to the latch. The lid opened with a grinding protest of rusted metal, revealing contents that made Carter's breath catch in his throat. Inside the box, wrapped in multiple layers of plastic, lay a stack of official-looking documents and what appeared to be personal letters. The papers showed signs of military classification markings, and Carter recognized the distinctive format of operational briefings, despite the text being too small to read clearly in the morning light. His hand shook as he lifted the documents, and Shadow pressed against his side, as if sensing his distress. The first letter in the stack bore Carter's name in handwriting he didn't recognize, along with his military service number and a classification stamp he'd never seen before. The letter was dated July 15, 2018, 3 months before Carter's medical discharge from the Navy. According to his official service record, he'd spent that entire period in a stateside rehabilitation facility, recovering from injuries sustained in Syria. Yet this letter suggested something entirely different had occurred during those supposedly missing months. Carter's vision blurred as he read the opening lines of the letter. Sergeant Lang, by the time you read this, Operation Midnight Echo will have been completed successfully. Your voluntary participation in this classified memory modification program has served your country with distinction. The words seemed to swim on the page as Carter struggled to process their implications. Memory modification program. Voluntary participation. These phrases belonged in science fiction novels, not official military correspondence. Shadow whined softly and nudged Carter's arm, as if sensing the profound shift occurring in his handler's understanding of reality. Carter forced himself to continue reading, though each sentence felt like a physical blow. The letter detailed a covert operation conducted in Southeast Asia, describing Carter's role in extracting a high-value target from a heavily fortified compound. The mission parameters, the tactical approaches, even the extraction routes were laid out in meticulous detail, but Carter retained no memory of any of it. The second letter bore Marcus Rivera's signature and was addressed directly to Carter. My friend, it began, if you're reading this, then something has gone wrong with the memory suppression protocol, and Shadow has led you to the truth as we planned. Carter's hands trembled as he realized that Rivera hadn't been a random handyman who died in a car accident. He'd been Carter's partner on a mission that had apparently been erased from both their official records and Carter's memory. Rivera's letter continued with devastating clarity. The operation succeeded beyond our wildest expectations, but the political ramifications were too dangerous for public knowledge. They offered us a choice: complete memory suppression with generous compensation and medical benefits, or face potential criminal charges for actions taken under direct orders. We both chose to forget, but I couldn't live with losing everything we'd done together. I hid these documents before the procedure, and I trained Shadow to find them if the suppression ever failed. Carter felt the world tilting around him as he absorbed Rivera's words, the military medical treatment he'd received, the gaps in his memory that doctors had attributed to traumatic brain injury, the inexplicable sense that something crucial was missing from his life. All of it suddenly made horrible sense. He'd been living a carefully constructed lie, and only his dog's instincts had preserved any connection to his authentic past. The remaining letters detailed the specifics of Operation Midnight Echo with a level of detail that made Carter's trained military mind recoil in recognition. Despite having no conscious memory of the events described, something deep in his subconscious responded to the tactical language and operational procedures outlined in the documents. His body seemed to remember what his mind had been forced to forget, muscle memory stirring in response to descriptions of complex infiltration techniques and combat protocols. According to Rivera's account, Operation Midnight Echo had involved the rescue of a captured American journalist who had stumbled onto evidence of illegal arms trafficking between Nazi, corrupt military contractors and insurgent groups. The mission had taken place in a region of Myanmar where American forces had no official presence, making it completely off the books and politically explosive. Carter and Rivera had successfully extracted the journalist, but the evidence she'd gathered implicated several high-ranking Pentagon officials in the trafficking operation. Shadow's head tilted as Carter read aloud from one of Rivera's letters, the dog's ears perking up at certain code names and operational details, as if he too retained fragmentary memories of those events. Carter realized that Shadow must have been part of the original mission team, which explained the dog's unusual training and his uncanny ability to detect hidden dangers that other animals missed. The memory suppression had affected Carter, but had left Shadow's canine memory intact, creating a living connection to a past that had been surgically removed from Carter's consciousness. The fourth letter revealed the most disturbing details yet. Rivera described the memory modification procedure as experimental technology, borrowed from research into treating severe PTSD in special operations veterans. The program had been classified at the highest levels and conducted without proper oversight or ethical review. Carter and Rivera had been among the first test subjects, guinea pigs in a program designed to create plausible deniability for military operations that violated international law. As Carter continued reading, he discovered that Rivera had experienced partial memory recovery several months before his death. The letter described recurring nightmares and flashbacks that gradually revealed the truth about Operation Midnight Echo. Rivera had attempted to contact Carter through official channels, but found that all records of their partnership had been classified or destroyed. The car accident that killed Rivera had occurred just days after he'd tried to reach out to a journalist about the memory modification program. Carter's hands clenched around the letters as the implications sank in. Rivera's death might not have been an accident at all, but rather an elimination of a potential whistleblower who threatened to expose the illegal program. The timing was too convenient, the circumstances too neat. Carter found himself wondering how many other veterans had been subjected to similar procedures, their authentic memories replaced with carefully crafted cover stories designed to protect government officials from accountability. Shadow suddenly tensed and turned toward the cemetery entrance. His ears pricked forward in alert attention. Carter followed the dog's gaze and spotted a black sedan with tinted windows parked near the main gate. The vehicle hadn't been there when they'd arrived, and its occupants remained hidden behind the dark glass. Carter's military paranoia flared to life as he quickly gathered the letters and container, stuffing them into his jacket while keeping one eye on the mysterious car. "Time to go, Shadow," Carter whispered, but the dog remained frozen in place, his body language suggesting the presence of a threat. Carter's training took over as he assessed their tactical situation. The cemetery offered limited escape routes, and the open ground between their position and the nearest exit would leave them exposed to potential hostile observation. Carter's mind automatically began calculating firing angles and cover positions, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. The sedan's engine started, and Carter watched as it slowly circled the cemetery's perimeter road. The vehicle's occupants were clearly conducting surveillance, confirming Carter's worst fears about the documents they'd discovered. Someone had been monitoring the gravesite, possibly waiting for exactly this moment when the buried secrets would finally surface. Carter realized that Rivera's contingency plan had anticipated this possibility, which explained why the letters had been buried rather than hidden in a more conventional location. Carter made a tactical decision to move immediately rather than wait for the surveillance team to position themselves more advantageously. He clipped Shadow's leash and began walking toward the cemetery's rear exit, using the larger monuments and mausoleums as cover, while maintaining a casual pace that wouldn't reveal his awareness of being watched. Shadow matched his movement perfectly, the dog's training evident in how smoothly he adapted to Carter's evasive maneuvering. As they reached the back fence, Carter heard car doors slamming near the main entrance. Multiple footsteps echoed across the cemetery grounds, moving with the coordinated precision of trained operatives. Carter boosted himself over the chain-link fence and helped Shadow through a gap in the mesh, his heart racing as he realized how close they'd come to being cornered. The documents in his jacket felt like they weighed 100 pounds, their significance growing with each passing moment. Carter's pickup truck was parked 2 blocks away, and he forced himself to maintain a normal walking pace as they made their way through the residential neighborhood surrounding the cemetery. Shadow stayed close to his side, occasionally glancing back toward the graveyard with the alertness of a sentry on duty. Carter's mind raced as he considered their options. The documents represented explosive evidence of government misconduct, but bringing them to light would almost certainly put both their lives in danger. When they reached the truck, Carter quickly loaded Shadow into the passenger seat and started the engine, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors for signs of pursuit. The black sedan appeared at the end of the street just as Carter pulled away from the curb, confirming that their discovery hadn't gone unnoticed. Carter took a deliberately circuitous route home, using techniques he'd learned for detecting and evading surveillance while deployed overseas. Carter's small apartment on the outskirts of town felt simultaneously like a sanctuary and a trap as he spread Rivera's letters across his kitchen table. Shadow settled beside his chair, the dog's presence providing comfort as Carter delved deeper into the shocking revelations contained in the documents. Each letter revealed additional layers of the conspiracy that had stolen his memories and apparently cost Rivera his life. The 5th letter contained photographs that made Carter's stomach lurch with recognition. His conscious mind couldn't explain. The images showed him and Rivera in military gear he didn't remember wearing, standing beside a helicopter in what appeared to be a jungle environment. Carter's face in the photographs bore an expression of grim determination that felt alien yet familiar, as if he were looking at a stranger who happened to share his features. One photograph showed Carter rappelling from the helicopter, while Shadow waited in the aircraft's doorway, his tactical harness clearly visible. Another image captured the moment of extraction, with Carter and Rivera supporting a disheveled woman between them as they ran toward the waiting aircraft. The woman's face had been deliberately obscured in the photograph, but her clothing and general appearance matched the description of the captured journalist mentioned in the operational briefings. Carter studied his own face in the photographs, searching for any flicker of recognition that might break through the artificial barriers in his memory. The man in these images carried himself with a confidence and competence that Carter struggled to reconcile with his fragmented recollections of that time period. According to his official medical records, he'd been barely functional during those months, suffering from severe depression and PTSD symptoms that required intensive psychiatric treatment. Rivera's final letter provided the most disturbing revelation yet. The memory modification program hadn't been limited to operational details. It had fundamentally altered Carter's personality and emotional responses. The confident, capable operative shown in the photographs had been replaced with a broken veteran struggling with mental health issues that served as cover for his missing memories. Carter's entire post-military identity had been artificially constructed to explain away the gaps in his recollection. The letter described how Rivera had volunteered for the memory suppression specifically to avoid the personality modification aspects of the program. He'd been willing to forget the mission, but unwilling to allow his essential self to be rewritten by government psychologists. Rivera's decision had apparently saved his authentic personality while leaving him vulnerable to partial memory recovery, which ultimately led to his elimination when he became a security risk. Carter's phone rang, startling him from his intense focus on the documents. The caller ID showed his VA therapist's office, which struck him as oddly coincidental given what he'd just discovered. Carter let the call go to voicemail, suddenly suspicious of everyone in his life who claimed to be helping him. How many of his medical providers were actually part of the cover-up designed to maintain his artificial amnesia? Shadow's low growl drew Carter's attention to the window, where a different surveillance vehicle had taken position across the street. This one was a gray SUV with government plates, making no attempt to conceal its presence. Carter realized that his movements were being tracked in real time, possibly through his cell phone or vehicle GPS. The operatives monitoring him had decided that subtlety was no longer necessary. Carter's military mind automatically shifted into operational mode as he assessed their tactical situation. The apartment was compromised, his vehicle was likely being tracked, and his communications were probably monitored. He needed to disappear quickly, while preserving the evidence that could expose the conspiracy. Carter moved through his apartment with practiced efficiency, gathering essential supplies and destroying anything that might provide clues about his destination. The documents went into a waterproof bag, along with Shadow's service records and Carter's own military personnel file. Carter had learned enough about government cover-ups to know that physical evidence could be made to disappear with frightening ease, but digital copies distributed to multiple recipients might prove harder to suppress. He photographed each letter and document with his phone before transferring the images to an encrypted cloud storage account he'd established years earlier for personal security. Shadow watched Carter's preparations with the alert attention of a working dog ready for deployment. The German Shepherd seemed to understand that they were transitioning from routine civilian life to something far more dangerous and complex. Carter clipped a tactical collar around Shadow's neck, the device containing GPS tracking and emergency communication capabilities that might prove essential if they became separated. Carter's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was working in her garden when they slipped out the apartment's rear exit, and she waved cheerfully as they passed. The normalcy of the interaction felt surreal, given the magnitude of what they'd discovered. But Carter managed to return her greeting without revealing his internal turmoil. Mrs. Chen had always been kind to Shadow, and Carter made a mental note to ensure their departure didn't put her at risk from the surveillance team. They made their way through a series of back alleys and side streets, Carter using urban evasion techniques while maintaining the appearance of a routine walk with his dog. Shadow adapted seamlessly to their covert movement, his training evident in how he anticipated Carter's direction changes and remained alert for potential threats. The partnership between man and dog felt more natural than it had in years, as if the discovery of their shared past had reactivated dormant aspects of their professional relationship. Carter's destination was the home of his former Navy buddy Jake Patterson, who lived in a rural area 20 miles outside town. Jake had served in military intelligence and possessed both the technical skills and security clearance to help verify the authenticity of the documents. More importantly, Jake had always suspected that something was wrong with Carter's official medical discharge story, and he'd been quietly investigating inconsistencies in Carter's service record for months. The walk to Jake's house took 3 hours, during which Carter had ample time to study his surroundings for signs of pursuit. The surveillance team seemed to have lost track of them after the first few miles, but Carter knew that professional operatives would have multiple backup tracking methods. They needed to reach Jake's secure location before their pursuers could regroup and establish a perimeter around their destination. Jake's property occupied 40 acres of heavily wooded land, with his house situated at the end of a long gravel driveway that provided excellent visibility for detecting approaching vehicles. Carter and Shadow emerged from the tree line, just as Jake was finishing his morning coffee on the front porch, and Jake's expression shifted immediately from surprise to concern as he recognized the urgency in Carter's gruff bearing. "What's wrong?" Jake asked, setting down his coffee mug and standing to face them. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The observation was more accurate than Jake could have imagined, and Carter found himself struggling to find words that would adequately convey the magnitude of what they'd discovered. Shadow trotted directly to Jake and sat at attention, behavior that Jake immediately recognized as significant given his familiarity with military working dogs. Carter handed over Rivera's letters without preamble, watching as Jake's expression grew increasingly grave with each document he examined. Jake's intelligence background made him uniquely qualified to assess the authenticity of classified materials, and his growing tension confirmed Carter's worst fears about the document's legitimacy. The evidence they'd uncovered represented a conspiracy that reached far beyond simple memory modification, extending into systematic abuse of military personnel for illegal political purposes. "This is authentic," Jake said finally, his voice heavy with implications. "These operational briefings follow proper classification protocols, and the technical details about the memory modification program match rumors I've heard from contacts still active in intelligence circles." Carter, If this is real, then you were subjected to experimental psychological manipulation without proper consent or oversight. Jake's confirmation hit Carter like a physical blow, forcing him to confront the reality that his entire post-military life had been built on artificially implanted foundations. The depression, the PTSD symptoms, the gaps in his memory that had plagued him for years, all of it had been deliberately induced to cover up his participation in an illegal operation. Carter felt a surge of rage unlike anything he'd experienced since his combat deployments, but this anger was directed at his own government rather than foreign enemies. Shadow sensed Carter's emotional state and pressed against his legs, providing the grounding presence that had sustained Carter through countless difficult moments since his discharge. The dog's loyalty felt even more precious now that Carter understood they'd shared experiences that transcended normal human-animal bonds. Shadow had been his partner in operations that required absolute trust and coordination, and that professional relationship had evolved into something deeper during their civilian life together. Jake disappeared into his house and returned with a laptop and several pieces of electronic equipment that Carter recognized as military-grade communication and detection devices. Jake's intelligence background had left him well-equipped to handle sensitive materials and secure communications, advantages that might prove crucial in deciding how to respond to their discovery. Carter watched as Jake photographed each document with a high-resolution camera before beginning an encrypted transmission to contacts he trusted within the intelligence community. "We need to move carefully," Jake warned as he worked. "If these documents are authentic, then the people responsible for this program have access to resources and authority that make them extremely dangerous. They've already killed Rivera to protect their secret, and they won't hesitate to eliminate us if we threaten their security." Jake's matter-of-fact assessment of their peril helped Carter focus his thinking and begin developing a strategic response to their situation. The morning sun climbed higher as Jake continued his analysis of the documents, cross-referencing details with classified databases he could still access through his security clearance. Carter found himself pacing restlessly around Jake's property, shadow matching his movements as they both struggled with the nervous energy that came from confronting an enemy they couldn't see or directly engage. The waiting felt more difficult than any combat situation Carter could remember, though he realized his memories of combat might themselves be unreliable. Jake's laptop chimed with an incoming encrypted message, and his expression grew even more serious as he read the response from his intelligence contacts. "Carter, you need to see this," Jake said, turning the screen so Carter could read the message. "My source confirms that Operation Midnight Echo was real, but it was shut down after Rivera's death because of security concerns. Apparently, other program participants have been experiencing memory recovery, and several have died under suspicious circumstances." End quote. The message included a list of names that made Carter's blood run cold. 8 veterans who had been discharged around the same time as Carter had all died within the past 2 years, victims of apparent suicides, accidents, and sudden medical emergencies. The statistical probability of so many deaths among such a small group was virtually impossible unless someone was systematically eliminating potential witnesses to the memory modification program. Carter realized that his own survival might be due entirely to Shadow's presence and their isolated lifestyle. The dog's protective instincts and military training had probably deterred multiple assassination attempts that Carter had never consciously detected. Shadow's obsessive behavior at Rivera's grave suddenly made perfect sense. The dog had been trying to warn Carter that they were in danger and needed to recover the evidence that might save their lives. Jake's phone rang, displaying a number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously, and Carter watched his friend's face grow pale as he listened to the caller. "We need to leave immediately," Jake said after ending the call. "That was my source at the Pentagon. There's a kill team en route to this location, and they'll be here within the hour. Apparently, your discovery of those documents triggered some kind of automated alert system." Carter felt his combat training surge to the surface as they prepared for immediate departure. Jake gathered essential equipment, while Carter secured the documents and prepared Shadow for extended travel. The partnership between the three of them felt natural and efficient, as if they'd trained together for exactly this type of emergency evacuation. Carter wondered how many other suppressed memories might surface as their situation became more dangerous. Jake's escape plan involved using his knowledge of local terrain and military tactics to evade their pursuers while making contact with friendly elements within the intelligence community. They would travel cross-country using hiking trails and back roads, avoiding main highways where surveillance cameras and roadblocks could track their movement. The approach required physical endurance and tactical discipline, but it offered their best chance of reaching safety while preserving the evidence of the conspiracy. As they loaded supplies into Jake's off-road vehicle, Carter caught sight of dust clouds on the horizon that suggested approaching vehicles. The kill team was arriving ahead of schedule, forcing them to abandon their methodical preparation and flee immediately. Jake gunned the engine as they bounced across rough terrain toward the tree line. Shadow braced securely between the two men as they raced against time and trained killers. The next several hours blurred together in a series of tactical movements and evasive maneuvers that tested every skill Carter had learned during his military service. Despite his missing memories, his body remembered how to move through hostile territory and avoid detection by enemy forces. Shadow proved invaluable as an early warning system, his acute senses providing advance notice of approaching threats that human perception might miss. They reached Jake's predetermined safe house as the sun was setting, a remote cabin owned by another former intelligence operative who specialized in protecting whistleblowers and defectors. The location offered multiple escape routes and defensive positions, along with secure communication equipment that would allow them to contact journalists and congressional investigators without being monitored by hostile forces. Carter spent the evening reviewing Rivera's letters again, each reading revealing additional details that helped piece together the full scope of Operation Midnight Echo and its aftermath. The more he learned about his suppressed experiences, the more he understood how profoundly the memory modification had damaged his sense of identity and purpose. The capable, confident operative, described in the documents, felt like a completely different person, yet Carter could sense that man's presence stirring somewhere deep in his psyche. Shadow curled up beside Carter's chair as they planned their next moves, the dog's calm presence helping to anchor Carter in the present moment, despite the revelations swirling through his mind. Carter realized that Shadow represented the most authentic connection to his true past, a living reminder of experiences that had been stolen from his conscious memory. The bond between them had survived artificial amnesia and government manipulation, proving stronger than any technological attempt to sever their partnership. Jake's secure communication with friendly elements within the intelligence community confirmed that Carter's situation was part cry of a much larger scandal involving illegal human experimentation and cover-ups that reached into the highest levels of government. The memory modification program had been conducted without congressional oversight and violated numerous laws protecting human subjects in medical research. Carter and Rivera had been victims of war crimes committed by their own government against American military personnel. The journalists who agreed to investigate Carter's story required extensive corroboration before they would publish such explosive allegations. Carter found himself submitting to medical examinations and psychological evaluations designed to document the evidence of memory modification in his brain chemistry and neural patterns. The tests revealed clear signs of artificial memory suppression, providing scientific proof that supported the claims made in Rivera's letters. Shadow's role in uncovering the conspiracy made him a key witness whose behavior and training provided independent confirmation of Carter's suppressed experiences. Veterinary examinations revealed that Shadow had been surgically implanted with a tracking device that was subsequently deactivated after Carter's discharge, suggesting that the dog had been monitored as part of the BLAR cover-up operation. The device's presence proved that Shadow had been much more than a simple service animal. As the investigation gained momentum, Carter began experiencing fragments of recovered memory that aligned perfectly with the details described in Rivera's letters. The artificial barriers in his mind seemed to be weakening under the pressure of external evidence and emotional stress. Carter found himself remembering tactical details, operational procedures, and personal moments with Rivera that had been completely erased from his consciousness for years. The recovered memories were often accompanied by intense physical and emotional reactions that required careful management to avoid psychological breakdown. Carter's authentic personality began reasserting itself as the artificial programming lost its effectiveness, creating a disorienting sense of rediscovering his true identity after years of living as someone else. Shadow seemed to recognize these changes, responding to Carter with increasing enthusiasm as more of his original self emerged. The story broke simultaneously across multiple news outlets, creating a media firestorm that forced government officials to respond to detailed allegations of illegal human experimentation and systematic cover-ups. The evidence Carter and Rivera had preserved proved impossible to discredit or dismiss, leading to congressional hearings and criminal investigations that exposed the full scope of the memory modification program. Carter's testimony before Congress provided a human face for the abstract concepts of government overreach and military abuse. His articulate description of living with artificially induced amnesia while struggling with implanted psychological trauma resonated with veterans advocates and civil liberties organizations across the country. Shadow's presence during the hearings added emotional weight to Carter's account, the dog's obvious loyalty and intelligence making their partnership tangible for television audiences. The investigation revealed that dozens of special operations veterans had been subjected to memory modification procedures, with many dying under suspicious circumstances when they began recovering authentic memories. The program had been designed to create plausible deniability for illegal military operations while eliminating potential witnesses who might expose government misconduct. Carter and Shadow had survived only because Rivera's contingency planning had provided them with evidence that was too compelling to ignore or suppress. Rivera's grave became a symbol of resistance against government secrecy and abuse of military personnel. Veterans organizations established a memorial garden around the site, honoring not only Rivera's sacrifice, but all the victims of the memory modification program who had died protecting their country's secrets. Shadow visited the grave regularly, but his obsessive digging behavior had been replaced by a calmer recognition that their mission had been completed successfully. The legal proceedings that followed Carter's revelations resulted in criminal convictions for several high-ranking military and intelligence officials who had authorized or participated in the illegal program. Comprehensive reforms were implemented to prevent similar abuses in the future, including mandatory congressional oversight of all research involving military personnel and strict protocols for obtaining informed consent in medical experiments. Carter's recovery of his authentic memories proceeded gradually over several months, guided by medical professionals who specialized in treating victims of psychological manipulation. The process was often painful and disorienting, but each recovered memory helped restore his sense of identity and purpose. Shadow remained his constant companion throughout the recovery, the dog's presence providing stability as Carter rebuilt his understanding of who he truly was. The financial compensation Carter received for his suffering could never truly make up for the years of stolen memories and artificial trauma, but it provided him with the resources to establish a foundation dedicated to helping other veterans who had been victimized by illegal government programs. Shadow became the foundation's unofficial mascot, his story inspiring others to trust their instincts when something felt wrong about their military experiences. Carter's relationship with Shadow evolved as his authentic memories returned, their partnership deepening as both man and dog remembered the experiences they'd shared during their classified operations. The trust and coordination they developed in combat situations translated seamlessly into their civilian work, helping other veterans navigate the complex process of memory recovery and psychological healing. The small town of Willowbrook was forever changed by the revelations that emerged from their quiet cemetery. Local residents struggled to comprehend that such momentous events had been unfolding in their midst, hidden beneath the mundane surface of daily life. The cemetery became a destination for veterans and their families, seeking to honor those who had died protecting dangerous secrets, transforming a forgotten corner of the graveyard into a place of pilgrimage and subtle remembrance. Carter often reflected on the strange twists of fate that had led Shadow to Rivera's grave at exactly the right moment to prevent their elimination by the kill team. The dog's instincts had somehow preserved the truth, despite sophisticated efforts to bury it permanently alongside Rivera's body. Carter came to believe that some bonds between partners transcend the reach of technology and government manipulation, surviving even when conscious memory has been stolen. The media attention surrounding their story eventually faded, but Carter and Shadow continued their work with other veterans who suspected they might have been victims of similar programs. Each case they investigated revealed additional aspects of the government's systematic abuse of military personnel, building a comprehensive picture of institutional corruption that spanned multiple decades and, quote, affected hundreds of potential victims. Shadow's exceptional abilities made him uniquely qualified to detect evidence that human investigators might miss. His training and instincts proving invaluable in uncovering hidden documents and concealed burial sites where other victims had hidden evidence of their experiences. Carter learned to trust Shadow's judgment completely, understanding that the dog's memory had preserved crucial details that could help other families find closure and justice. Years later, as Carter stood beside Rivera's grave during the annual memorial service for victims of the memory modification program, he marveled at the chain of events that had brought the truth to light. Shadow sat beside him, older now, but still alert and dignified, his presence a reminder that authentic relationships could survive even the most determined efforts to destroy them. The simple granite headstone had become a monument to the power of loyalty and the importance of preserving truth despite official attempts to bury it. The foundation Carter established grew into a national organization that provided support for veterans dealing with unexplained gaps in their military service or suspicious changes in their medical records. Shadow's story became a symbol of hope for families seeking answers about loved ones who had died under mysterious circumstances after completing classified assignments. The dog's persistence in uncovering the truth inspired others to trust their instincts when official explanations didn't align with their experiences. Carter's recovered memories eventually included emotional details that the documents couldn't convey, particularly his deep friendship with Rivera and their shared commitment to protecting innocent civilians during their covert operations. The memory modification program had stolen not just tactical information, but also the human connections that gave meaning to their military service. Recovering those relationships, even in fragmentary form, helped Carter understand why Rivera had been willing to risk everything to preserve evidence of their partnership. The investigation into the memory modification program ultimately led to broader reforms in how the military conducts classified research involving human subjects. Carter's advocacy work helped establish legal protections for veterans who report suspicious or unethical treatment, ensuring that future victims would have recourse when confronted with government abuse. Shadow's role in the story became part of military working dog training programs, demonstrating how the animal's loyalty and memory could serve as safeguards against human corruption. As Carter approached his 60th birthday, he reflected on the strange journey that had led him from artificial amnesia to becoming a voice for veterans' rights. Shadow had aged alongside him, the dog's muzzle now gray, but his eyes still sharp with intelligence and purpose. Their partnership had become legendary within veteran communities, proof that authentic bonds could survive any attempt at artificial manipulation or government interference. The final revelation came 5 years after they'd first uncovered Rivera's letters, when Shadow's declining health prompted Carter to research the dog's complete medical history. Hidden within Shadow's veterinary records, Carter discovered evidence that the dog had also been subjected to experimental procedures designed to enhance his memory and sensory capabilities. Shadow hadn't just been a witness to the memory modification program. He'd been another victim whose natural abilities had been artificially augmented for military purposes. The discovery explained Shadow's exceptional performance during their covert operations and his unusual persistence in uncovering the buried evidence. The same experimental technology that had stolen Carter's memories had enhanced Shadow's natural instincts, creating an unintended safeguard against the very conspiracy that had victimized them both. The irony wasn't lost on Carter that the government's own experimental program had contained the seeds of its eventual exposure. Shadow's enhanced memory began deteriorating as he aged, but rather than losing his recollections entirely, the dog seemed to be transferring his most important memories to Carter through their continued partnership. Carter found himself experiencing vivid dreams and sudden flashes of recognition that perfectly matched the operational details described in Rivera's letters. It was as if Shadow was gradually returning the memories that rightfully belonged to his human partner. The Congressional Committee investigating the memory modification program issued its final report on a cold December morning, with Carter and Shadow present in the gallery as lawmakers detailed their findings. The report documented systematic abuse, affecting over 200 military personnel, with evidence suggesting that the program had been expanded beyond its original counterterrorism mandate to include domestic surveillance and political operations. The scope of the conspiracy exceeded even Carter's worst fears about government overreach. Carter's testimony had been instrumental in securing criminal convictions for 17 former officials, including 2 retired generals and a former deputy director of the CIA. The sentences were largely symbolic, given the advanced age of most defendants, but the legal precedent established important protections for future victims of government experimentation. More importantly, the investigation had forced institutional changes that made similar abuses far more difficult to conduct and conceal. Shadow's health continued to decline as winter approached, but the dog remained determined to complete one final visit to Rivera's grave. Carter supported his aging companion as they made their way through the cemetery. Shadow's steps slower, but his purpose unchanged. The memorial garden that had grown around Rivera's burial site now included dozens of markers honoring other victims of the memory modification program, creating a place where families could grieve loved ones whose true service had been hidden for years. As they stood beside Rivera's headstone, Carter felt a profound sense of completion wash over him. The investigation had achieved justice for Rivera and the other victims, while establishing legal precedents that would protect future veterans from similar abuse. Shadow had fulfilled his mission to preserve the truth, despite overwhelming odds and sophisticated opposition. Their partnership had accomplished something that individual efforts could never have achieved. Shadow's final act was to place his paw on Rivera's headstone, a gesture that seemed to convey both farewell and victory. Carter understood that his companion was ready to rest, having seen their shared mission through to its successful conclusion. The dog's loyalty had transcended death threats, memory modification, and years of uncertainty to deliver justice for his fallen handler and protection for his living partner. The memorial service for Shadow drew hundreds of veterans and their families, all of whom had been touched by the story of a dog whose refusal to forget had exposed one of the military's darkest secrets. Carter delivered a eulogy that honored Shadow's service while acknowledging the profound bond that had sustained them through their most difficult trials. The dog's legacy would live on through the Foundation's work and the legal protections his discovery had made possible. Carter buried Shadow beside Rivera's grave, creating a permanent memorial to their extraordinary partnership and the courage that had brought truth to light. The cemetery, that had once hidden dangerous secrets, became a place of healing and remembrance, where veterans could honor authentic service while confronting the reality of institutional betrayal. Shadow's story became part of military working dog training programs, ensuring that future handlers would understand the deep loyalty and intelligence that made these animals invaluable partners. In the years that followed, Carter continued his advocacy work with a sense of purpose that had been missing during his artificially amnesiac period. His recovered memories provided him with a complete understanding of his military service and the skills that made him effective in helping other veterans navigate complex bureaucratic and legal challenges. The Foundation's success in supporting memory modification victims led to expanded programs addressing various forms of military-related trauma and abuse. Carter's final report to Congress, delivered on the 10th anniversary of Shadow's discovery, summarized the lasting impact of their investigation on military ethics and veterans' rights. The memory modification program had been completely dismantled, its research destroyed, and its methods banned under new federal legislation. More than 100 surviving victims had received compensation and medical treatment, while families of deceased participants finally learned the truth about their loved ones' service and sacrifice. The report also documented how Shadow's story had influenced military working dog programs, leading to better protections for animals used in classified operations, and ensuring that their service would be properly recognized and honored. Carter recommended that all military working dogs receive the same legal protections as human veterans, acknowledging their crucial contributions to national security and the profound bonds they formed with their DDA handlers. As Carter concluded his testimony, he reflected on the remarkable journey that had begun with a dog's stubborn refusal to leave a lonely grave. Shadow's instincts had preserved truth when human systems had failed, demonstrating that loyalty and courage could overcome even the most sophisticated attempts at deception and cover-up. Their story became a testament to the power of authentic partnerships and the importance of preserving memory despite official efforts to rewrite history. The investigation that started in Willowbrook Cemetery ultimately transformed how the military conducts classified research and treats veterans who participate in sensitive operations. Carter's advocacy work established legal precedents that protected future service members from experimental procedures conducted without proper consent and oversight. Shadow's legacy lived on through these institutional changes and the hundreds of veterans whose stories were finally heard and honored. Carter's final visit to the Memorial Garden occurred on a spring morning, exactly 10 years after Shadow had first begun digging beside Rivera's grave. The site had become a place of pilgrimage for veterans and their families, a reminder that truth could survive any attempt to bury it permanently. Carter placed flowers on both graves, honoring the partnership that had changed his life and exposed a conspiracy that had victimized hundreds of dedicated service members. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cemetery as Carter walked away from the Memorial Garden, his mission finally complete. Shadow's determination to uncover the truth had saved Carter's life while exposing crimes that might otherwise have remained hidden forever. Their story had become part of American military history, a reminder that authentic loyalty could triumph over institutional betrayal, and that the bonds between partners could transcend even the most determined efforts to destroy them. The town of Willowbrook erected a statue honoring Shadow's service, depicting the German Shepherd in alert pose beside a granite memorial listing the names of all memory modification program victims. The statue became a gathering place for veterans, and a symbol of the courage required to confront uncomfortable truths about institutional failures. Carter spoke at the dedication ceremony, sharing how one dog's refusal to forget had changed everything for hundreds of families seeking justice and closure. Years later, military historians would identify Shadow's discovery as a turning point in veterans' rights advocacy and government accountability. The case established important legal precedents while demonstrating how individual courage and loyalty could expose systematic abuse of power. Carter's Foundation continued expanding its mission, providing support for veterans dealing with various forms of institutional betrayal and experimental abuse. The documents Rivera had preserved became part of the permanent collection at the National Archives, ensuring that future researchers and advocates would have access to evidence of the memory modification program. Carter donated his personal papers and Shadow's service records to the same collection, creating a comprehensive historical record of their investigation and its impact on military ethics and veterans' rights. Carter's autobiography, titled What Shadow Remembered, became a bestseller and was adapted into a documentary film that brought their story to an even wider audience. The book's proceeds supported the Foundation's work while educating the public about the challenges faced by veterans dealing with classified trauma and institutional betrayal. Shadow's image on the book's cover became an iconic symbol of loyalty and determination in the face of overwhelming adversity. The memory modification program's exposure led to broader investigations into other classified research programs involving human subjects, resulting in the discovery of additional victims and the implementation of comprehensive reforms in military medical research. Carter's advocacy work helped establish oversight mechanisms that made future abuses far more difficult to conduct and conceal, while providing resources for victims seeking justice and healing. As Carter entered his final years, he found peace in knowing that Shadow's legacy would continue through the institutional changes their investigation had achieved. The dog's refusal to abandon a forgotten grave had ultimately saved hundreds of lives, while establishing protections that would benefit future generations of military personnel. Their partnership had demonstrated that authentic loyalty could overcome any obstacle, including the most sophisticated attempts at memory manipulation and cover-up. The Memorial Garden at Willowbrook Cemetery grew into a national shrine honoring veterans who had served in classified operations, with Shadow's story serving as the centerpiece of educational programs about military working dogs and the importance of preserving historical truth. Carter's final speech at the site emphasized how individual acts of courage and loyalty could create lasting change, even when confronting seemingly insurmountable institutional power. Shadow's grave became a place where other veterans brought their own service dogs, creating an informal community of handlers who understood the profound bonds that developed between human and animal partners in dangerous situations. Carter often observed these visits from a distance, knowing that Shadow's story continued to inspire new generations of veterans and their canine companions to trust in the power of authentic partnerships. The investigation that began with a dog's determination to dig had ultimately revealed one of the most significant scandals in modern military history, leading to justice for hundreds of victims, while establishing protections that would prevent similar abuses in the future. Carter's life had been forever changed by Shadow's refusal to forget, transforming him from a victim of government manipulation into a powerful advocate for truth and accountability. The final chapter of their story was written not in government documents or congressional reports, but in the lives of veterans who found hope and healing through the Foundation's work. Carter's recovered memories had shown him that authentic service meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, a mission that Shadow had helped him continue long after their official military careers had ended. Their partnership had proven that loyalty and courage could overcome any obstacle, creating a legacy that would inspire future generations to stand up for truth and justice.